Welcome back to part 2 of our in-depth playthrough of Ultima II, Revenge of the Enchantress. I'm Michael Coorlim, and I just spent a lot of time grinding through 1,000 or so enemies to earn the coin to max out our stats. We can spend some of our leftover coins on power armor, the best armor in the game, and buy some rumors down at the pub. This was the only way to get tips in Ultima I, and it's still a good source in the sequel. This time, the tips are either flavor or relating to how items get used, and there are 3 that matter. They tell us that we're going to need skull keys and brass buttons for airplanes, and that guards carry keys. Not the skull keys, of which we have plenty from all of our grinding. No, guards carry regular keys for all the locked doors that we've seen in towns. They're the only source, so once again, to save the world, we're going to have to murder a lot of innocents. At least, this time they're armed combatants and not harmless jesters. Guards also happen to be the toughest enemy in the game, foes we wouldn't have stood a chance against if we hadn't maxed out our stats, and even with that in mind, we're going to want to fight as few as possible. Before that, though, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys a dungeon. Well, a tower which works the same way, only in reverse. And while not strictly necessary, it's an alternate place to grind because you can find chests full of money. We're also going to try and find a good weapon here. They're found randomly in chests. Dungeons are visually very similar to Ultima I dungeons with a few important distinctions. They're coded in assembly, not basic, so they load a lot faster. If you're not playing a caster, you'll need a lot of torches and tools to keep the place lit and disarm traps, which is one of the reasons why I haven't been grinding here instead. Third, the monsters look much better than the wireframe opponents we fought in the first game. And finally, we can see them from a distance. Once again, you'll fight the same pool of creatures on each level in each dungeon and tower. And once again, all the chests are in static locations on each floor, though the contents are random. Trap locations and monster spawns are random too, and there are plenty of secret doors that look like normal walls until you try to walk through them. You can definitely see that there is some inspiration from the rival Wizardry series here in this element of the Ultima game. As improved as dungeons are, there's really no reason to visit them unless you're playing one of the Japanese ports. In these, thieves no longer drop trilithium, the fuel your space shuttle is going to need, so you're going to need to head up all the way to a dungeon's 15th floor, which is the only source of the fuel in the game. We're not playing once of those, and since I have saved up enough torches from killing thieves at this point, I'm just going to grind around until I get a decent weapon. Alright, a few trips netted me a light sword, which will be useful to kill the first few guards until we can get the best weapon in the game. We're going to head back to Port Boniface, near Castle Britain, and murder some guards. Why here? Well, in each settlement there's one guard that's invincible and does a ton of damage. You can tell which one it is because they don't say anything when you talk to them. In most of the settlements we visited, they'll sit right near the only exit from town, but Port Boniface's murder guard is near the fountain in the middle of the town, giving us some leeway. Each guard we kill gives us 2 keys. After we kill our first guards, we can unlock the harbor and grab a boat and use its cannons to take out the rest. Other than the invincible one, of course. This is mandatory. You cannot beat Ultima II without murdering a few guards. There is no moral response to this, and if you leave and come back, nobody remembers what a monster you are. Alright, keys in hand, we make our way back to the American South and the new San Antonio, home to an airfield. Before we steal the airplane, though, we're going to do a little more grinding. We're going to need some money up ahead, and then we're going to get the best weapon in the game. It's here, in the jail, and we need to kill another guard to get in. Using a second key accesses Sentry the Swashbuckler, who we can buy the sword from for 500 gold. We equip it, but there's a problem. The guards coming for us can block our way, specifically the town's invincible guards, so we're going to use one of the strange coins we've collected from the thieves to negate time with the N key. This little trick lets us run away from the foes for a short time. Since we do so much grinding, it's rarely useful, but it is great in a few certain circumstances to avoid getting trapped. We leave town to reset the guards to their original posts and go to steal an airplane. The guy in here is hostile to us, and killing him activates all the guards, but we'll be gone before they're even in the building. The L key launches and lands the plane, so we're off. Controls here are kinda tricky. You can't hover, you're flying fast, and the plane can only land in grassland tiles. We head over to Greenland to wait for the time gate to Pangea. Planes, unlike ships, can taxi through the gates, so we can take it with us. To take a look at Pangea, we use one of the magical helms we've collected from thieves using the V key for view. This gives us a somewhat useful map of the area, though settlements and dungeons aren't marked. While this is one big mass, we do have mountain ranges to contend with, something our planes can hop over. Finding Baradin's town wasn't easy, but we manage. This town gives us 3 major clues. The 2 astronauts near the east exit tell us that Father Antos lives on planet X. A short distance away, the philosopher tells us that she's got to be at 999. This will make sense once we're in space. There's also an oracle here, providing clues at an increasing scale from 1 to 900 gold. Unfortunately, I reached Pangea with only about 100 gold, and grinding here is kind of a hassle, so I'm just going to grab 1 clue and go. The queen is the king, and the king is a spy. It doesn't really mean much. If we did have the gold to spend, we'd hear the oracle allude to a ring that we could get from a man under a tree that we'll need at some point. Pretend I killed another 400 or so monsters and paid for all the clues, so we know this. At this point, we exit through the nearby time door and end up in 2112 again. This time, though, we have an airplane and we can use it to find the post-apocalyptic future's Soul Town Pirates Harbor. which, oddly enough, has a weird Soviet-Russian theme. The village idiot is blocking the way to the launch pads, but if we kill him off, the guards will catch us before we can take off. We're going to go to the Pirate's Cove instead, grab a ship, and sail around to the spaceships. And here we go, into space. This is a lot simpler than the space combat minigame from Ultima 1. To go to a new planet, we enter hyperspace and enter the coordinates of the world we want to visit. You may remember from our first video that the game comes with a galaxy chart listing XYZ coordinates for each planet, the Earth being a jovial 666. We could visit any of these worlds. Some of them have dungeons, some of them have towns. However, landing is tricky, and there's no point to any of it. In perhaps the most vulgar and blatant example of online systems rushing Ultima II out before Garrett finished, there are 8 other worlds, each with their own map, and they're almost entirely empty. Venus and Saturn, absolutely nothing on them. Mercury has a single dungeon. The rest do have towns, but no important clues or dialogue aside from flavor text. What we need to visit, the only one of these worlds that matters, is Planet X, whose coordinates are 999, the clue we got in Baradin's town. So we warp to Planet X, and this is what happens. This represents our orbit around the planet, and we need to hit the L button to land while we're over grassland, or we die. It's pretty tough, as we have no control over where we're landing. This is the reason why I'm not going to bother landing on any of the other worlds. We cannot save without returning to Earth, and we'd have to do everything all over again if we crashed, and I really don't want to do that. We managed to land between Planet X's sole town and its castle, a primo spot, and hit the town first. Town Basco. Not much to do here but steal a galleon that we could use to explore the planet if there was anything else going on here, but there isn't. So we're just going to land and head to the castle instead. Talking to the king gives us the same options to buy hits that Lord British did, and it's worth stocking up because the endgame is near. But he's not a spy, so the oracle's clue is pretty meaningless. The queen does, however, tell us that Father Antos awaits, meaning that we're near the end of the quest line. The path to Antos leads us through a series of locked doors that was the reason we killed so many guards back on Earth. We go through some prison cells, an indoor swamp, and a kitchen area. Finding him earns his blessing with the admonishment to return to claim his ring, and we will! We head back to our rocket. Launch. Hyperspace back to Earth. And look for a good landing spot. This was much harder than it was on Planet X due to the much more difficult terrain, and we crash, killing ourselves. This is a frustrating sequence, and we've got to do it all again, from stealing the rocket to our landing. And we do. Steal the rocket, fly to X, meet Father Antos, land, get his ring from the guy under a tree in New San Antonio, and do some grinding to earn gold to build our hit points back up. We are now ready for the end game, and for that we fly to 1990 Australia and taxi through the last time gate we're going to need. This takes us to the Time of Legends, a singular landmass full of terrible monsters that are much harder than the ones we fought earlier, though they still give us the same 10 gold. We can fake them up a bit by flying around, landing and letting them swarm our former location, giving us a few to kill on the way to the castle. Our ring lets us pass through this barrier unharmed, and from here we can seek out Minax. We can use our trick that we just used with the airplane and our last strange coins to lure the enemies into some of the central rooms where their pathfinding will keep them stuck until we're done. Minax is tough. She hits us with magic missiles as we approach, and as soon as we hit her, she'll teleport to a room on the opposite corner of the castle. The Balrogs flanking her are also a pain. They can put us to sleep. The green idols we've collected offer some protection, but they're not perfect. We can trap them in the rooms between us and Minax too, and as we run back and forth between these corner chambers, they'll be stuck as long as we don't pass directly below their entrances. But that's the final battle. Hit Minax, run to the opposite corner, hit her again. It's a race between our dwindling hit points and her own, and eventually, we manage to land the killing blow. We're treated to a little animated end sequence, and then we're pulled into a rocket to orbit the Earth over the end text. It's not nearly as verbose as Ultima I was, but that's Ultima II. It managed to introduce the basic talk-to-NPC quest loop in a very primitive way, and for that influence alone, is hugely important, particularly for Dragon Quest and the games that it inspired, like Final Fantasy. Ultimately, Ultima II feels like a ghost town made of unmet potential. You can see the bones of a much larger game here, but it is sadly one we'll never get to see. That's one of the reasons why it's my least favorite game in the series. That and the grinding, the endless grinding. It's easy to blame online systems for pushing the game out the door, but this was Garriott's second ever commercial release, and it's just as likely that he had no idea how to scope for a reasonable time frame on a solo project. Eventually you have to ship, and eventually caught up with him. Next time, Ultima III, my favorite of the original trilogy.